Hey book lovers, I'm Elise, and today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of July. So compared to previous months, July went a little bit better as far as number of books that I read, but I didn't get any 5 stars. I haven't had any 5 stars since April. End of April was my last 5-star book. I think it's safe to say we're back in a 5-star drought. But in the month of July, I did read 9 books. The primary moods of these books were tense, mysterious, and dark. I read 4 thrillers, 2 horrors, 1 contemporary, 1 historical, and 1 science fiction. A little thriller heavy, but pretty wide variety. Average rating was 3.11. So I had 2 2-stars, 4 3-stars, and 3 4-stars. So starting with the 2-star books. I read The Stranger in Her House by John Mars. This is a new release thriller, and it follows Connie, who takes care of her mother Gwen, and this guy named Paul shows up, and he says that he's from this company that is supposed to help elderly people, you know, do things for them around the house. But Connie's starting to notice a lot of red flags, and he is like inserting himself more and more into Gwen's life, and Connie, she's not feeling it. She does not agree with this situation, and she tries to kind of get everyone in the town or in the neighborhood on board with figuring it out, like something is sketchy with this guy. One thing I will say about this book, it does take a pretty interesting turn that I did not see coming. Overall, it didn't really do for me what I wanted it to do, and to date, this is my least favorite John Mars book. The other 2-star book that I read was Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. I had an e-arc for this through NetGalley. This is a strange book. It's completely from the point of view of a little girl named Bella. I don't think we were ever explicitly told how old she is. I think she's probably like 8, 9, 10 years old, but sometimes she feels like she's 5. We follow Bella. She has a mom and a dad, and then there's this entity that lives in her closet called Other Mommy, and Other Mommy is haunting them, and she keeps trying to befriend Bella and keeps asking her if she can go into her heart, and Bella keeps telling her no. This angers Other Mommy, and Other Mommy starts to become more and more present in the household. Basically, this story is following this family of 3 and them trying to deal with this entity. I did not think that the book being from the POV of a child really worked. I would have liked to see the points of view of the parents. I feel like things would have been a little bit more, not necessarily relatable, but like easier for me to enjoy. You know, if we could get the point of view from any of the adults in the story, get their internal thoughts on the struggle of trying to come to terms with something that they can't believe that's real. For the most part, this book felt really repetitive in what it was trying to do, and it ended exactly how I thought it was going to end. So there wasn't much that I liked about this book, to be honest. It was a little creepy at times, and it takes place in Michigan, and that's really all it had going for it as far as I'm concerned. All right, getting into my 3-star books. The first is Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. I did a buddy read of this one with my friend Keisha over at A Book Like You, and I was really excited about this one because I've read by this author before and I've really enjoyed her. She's like usually a strong 4-star author for me. This one just didn't do it for me like the other books did. In this book, we follow 3 siblings, and their mom recently passed away. They've all kind of come home to deal with the will and the property and all the belongings. When they're going through some of the belongings of their parents, they come across this VHS tape. They think it's just a tape of a summer in the 90s, and it is, but then it cuts to their parents discussing a body, what happened to it, why it's there, and the fact that they need to get rid of it. And that kind of starts this whole investigation on their part, trying to figure out if their parents are guilty, what really happened. Maybe some of the things that they thought happened when they were younger didn't actually happen the way that they thought it did. Interesting concept. I did like the nostalgic 90s vibes. There's a lot of like 90s music talked about. There's a summer festival that takes place. So that part was all fine. But other than that, I mean, pretty generic thriller. I kind of guessed at the ending on this one too, which was a bit of a bummer, but it was fun to buddy read this with Keisha. My next 3-star read is Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I'm disappointed about this one because I had a theory that the Riley Sager green covers were books that were my jam. I love Home Before Dark, and I love The House Across the Lake. This one unfortunately did not fit the trend. This book follows Ethan, and when Ethan was 10 years old, he and his friend Billy were camping in his backyard in a tent, and when he woke up in the morning, Billy was nowhere to be found. 30 years later, he's 40 years old, he's come back home. His parents moved to like Florida, I think. Things start happening around the neighborhood that start to bring up memories of Billy and what happened that summer that he disappeared. It's dual timelines, so we do have the present timeline of Ethan as an adult trying to put the pieces together, and then we get the past timeline of the summer that Billy disappeared. And there's multiple POVs, so as the book goes on, you're gaining information from all these different people and ultimately end up figuring out what happened to Billy. I feel like this book had a lot of potential. This one also had 90s vibes, which I did like. There were a lot of Stranger Things vibes, which I loved. It did not go where it could have gone to be great, which is a huge bummer. I felt duped a little bit because I feel like the story was kind of gearing up towards something. It just like completely fizzled out and went in completely different directions. Decent book, but not my favorite. The next 3-star read is The Summer of Yes by Courtney Walsh. This one is a contemporary women's fiction kind of romance, and it follows Kelsey and Georgina. So Kelsey, she is randomly hit by a car. I think she's like walking on the sidewalk and she's randomly hit by a car. She almost dies and she's in the hospital, and it's kind of a wake-up call to her, like something needs to change. She's not happy in her life. I think her mom says something to her. It's like, I can't remember what they call it in the book, but it's like the type of event that is meant to disrupt your life because things are not going the way that they should be type situation. And in the hospital, she just so happens to be roomed with Georgina, who is this like older, sophisticated cosmetics guru or something. Like she has a really successful cosmetics line, and so she's filthy rich and super sassy. Her work is her life, and they kind of bond, optimistically so on Kelsey's side and involuntarily on Georgina's side. Kelsey ends up convincing Georgina to go on this Summer of Yes adventure with her. There were some things that I did really enjoy in this book, but for the most part, it was a little too light and fluffy for me. It didn't sink its claws into me the way that I like a book to do. The last 3-star is The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. This was actually the July book pick for Librenuts Book Club. Jordan of Sorry Book Solid was my co-host for the month. This is a murder mystery sci-fi. I'd never read by this author before, so I didn't really know what to expect, but I'm not a huge murder mystery fan, and this is definitely like heavily murder mystery. This takes place in a dystopian society where this mysterious fog has completely decimated like every part of the world except this village on this Greek island. And there's like over 100 villagers and 3 scientists that take care of this village and work together to maintain it. One night, one of the scientists is found stabbed to death. One of the villagers ends up taking on this investigation to figure out who committed the crime, because if they don't figure it out in a certain amount of time, the fog that has been held at bay by these barriers put up by the technology of the scientists is going to invade the island and kill everybody there. Very interesting concept. The delivery was just very dense, and I felt confused majority of the time. And I just, again, it's the murder mystery aspect that just wasn't doing it for me. That was kind of the downside of it. And I didn't like, it took on this whole like, this person's guilty, and then more information would come out and be like, no, this person's guilty, and just over and over and over again. And it's like, I felt like I couldn't trust anything that was being told to me. Some interesting concepts that I did like. There's this omniscient AI that is in the minds of everybody in the village. It can speak to people individually, but then you can like ask it in your mind or verbally or whatever where somebody is or what they're doing, and because they are also connected to that person, the AI can tell that. Very interesting read, but very confusing. Plus I really hated the audiobook, and unfortunately I did tandem read this with the physical book and the audiobook, and the audiobook did not do it for me. I think I would have enjoyed it more if I read this physically. And now on to my 4 stars, of which there were 3. We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. I don't know. I don't know what this book was. It's a horror, and it starts out with Charlie and Eve. They recently bought this home, and one night when she's like out getting groceries or something like that, and Eve is home alone with their dog, and somebody comes to knock on the door. And like, this is not a house in the middle of a neighborhood. Like, this is on a lane where, yeah, they're neighbors, but they're kind of like sparsely placed, and it's like in the middle of the woods in, I think, up a mountain, because there's lots of snow, and they talked a lot about like tire chains, and it was very strange for there to be a random knock on the door. So apprehensively, Eve answers the door, and it's this family, this man, his wife, and their 3 children. And he's like, hey, we used to live here. I wanted to show my family around, you know, could we do that? And obviously Eve doesn't want to, but she's kind of one of those people pleasers that doesn't want to tell people no. Ultimately, the family comes into the house and they overstay their welcome. And from the moment that they get there, like, things start happening, like really weird things, creepy basement. So I've never seen The Conjuring, but I've seen paranormal investigations of the actual Conjuring house. And for whatever reason, the basement of this house reminded me of the Conjuring house basement. I can't explain this book. Very unique. I can honestly say I've never read anything like this. And there are a lot of aspects in here that I very much enjoyed delving into, but then putting those into action of a book, it hurt my brain a little bit. And by the time I finished it, I wasn't sure if I liked it or not, and then ultimately I decided, yeah, I think I did. I think I did like it. And I didn't want to put it down. That's always a good sign. The next 4-star book is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is the same author as Eat, Pray, Love. This is a historical fiction. It follows Vivian Morris. So it takes place in New York City in the 1940s. Vivian Morris, she learned to sew and make clothing from her grandmother. She had a very close relationship with her grandmother, and then her grandmother passed away and she was really upset by it, and she ended up flunking out of Vassar College. And her parents, they're like really well-to-do, wealthy people. They didn't know what to do with her. They're like, you flunked out of college, you know, just go to New York City with your crazy aunt. She goes off to New York City, lives with her aunt. Her aunt lives in a theater, the Lily Theater, I believe it's called. They put on shows. Vivian, because of her seamstress skills, she ends up being the person that makes the costumes because they have to do everything very closely on budget. Now, this theater does not make a whole lot of money. And then eventually, because it is the 1940s, eventually we do get into a little bit of World War II discussion, but that honestly was only the second half of the book. The first half is very glamorous, you know, New York City theater life. I really enjoyed this. I loved the first half. The first half was definitely 5-star feels. Second half, I think because of the World War II talk and things becoming less glamorous, it wasn't quite as enjoyable, but overall I did really enjoy this. I loved the characters. They were really well done. I just think Elizabeth Gilbert's storytelling capability is really good. If you like historical fiction and you haven't read this, I definitely suggest you pick it up. The final 4-star book, and probably my favorite read of the month, was The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. This is a thriller. There's rich people drama, and there's women in their late 30s, early 40s that are behaving badly. Somebody winds up dead. It's kind of crazy. The huge giveaway that I really enjoyed this book was the fact that I didn't have the audiobook for it, so I read it completely physically, and I flew through more than half of it in a single day. Like, I did not want to put it down. This was really good. I've heard a lot of people say they love this book, and then I've heard a lot of people say, like, what the heck is going on here? This was my kind of thriller. The rich people drama, the toxic female friendships, the secrets, there's of course a pretty good twist at the end. This was a good time. I very much enjoyed it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of July. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite read in July was. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and until next time, bye.